Welcome at 12 o'clock p.m. on the Southwest Info. This evening we have a few statements for the record before we get started. Tonight's regularly scheduled town council work session is a virtual meeting. Next week's meeting is a public hearing and individuals are encouraged to participate and to provide comments for the record at town.clerk at herndon-va.gov. The work session this evening is conducted electronically pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3708.2 as amended, the Governor's Executive Orders as amended, and Ordinance 20-023, Continuity of Governmental Operations During Pandemic Disaster COVID-19 as amended. Proper notice of the electronic meeting was provided in accordance with Section 2.2-3708.2 of the Code of Virginia, along with information for viewing the meeting and submitting comments for the record. The agenda and meeting materials are available on the town's website. All electronic meetings will begin with a roll call vote to determine a quorum. All votes, including adjournment, will be by roll call vote. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Vicki. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all. It's been a little while. I will call our July 7th Town Council work session to order, and I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Town Manager Bill Ashton.
Town Manager Ashton is here.
Town Attorney Lisa Yates.
Town Attorney Lisa Yates is here.
Vice Mayor Olam.
Vice Mayor Olam here.
Councilmember Baker.
Councilmember Baker, present.
Councilmember De Aguila.
Councilmember De Aguila, present.
Councilmember DeCall.
Councilmember DeCall is here.
Councilmember Friedrichs.
Councilmember Friedrichs is here.
Councilmember McKenna.
Bill is here.
And Mayor Merkel.
Lisa Merkel is here. So for the record, we do have a quorum electronically. As we see, our town manager, Bill Ashton, and Lisa Yates, our town attorney, are also present. And we also have many of our staff members are logged in as well. As stated by the clerk, tonight's meeting is conducted by electronic means pursuant to the appropriate laws. And since it's been a little while, I'll remind you guys to try and raise your hand physically so I can call on you for our conversation. And we'll try to remember to state our name before our comments so it's easy for the record to be established. I will go ahead and recognize our town manager, Bill Ashton, to provide an update on the continuity of operations and matters related to the COVID-19 emergency. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Bill Ashton, Town Manager. Just wanted to bring you up to date on several things since it's been a while since last we spoke about these things. First off, through today, the county-wide numbers on COVID-19 are showing the testing across the county continually increasing. We have a positive test count that continues to decrease. And so that means the percent of positives is also still on the decrease. That is good news. The deceased cases are predominantly in the 65-year-old or older age group. That comprises about 86% of the county's deaths as a result of COVID. But there's some troubling data also that I was looking at and talking with Dr. Gloria about, and that is the disproportionate effect this virus is having on our Latino community. Whereas the Latino community, according to county records, is about 16% of the county population, they right now are comprising about 61% of the cases. It's tragic that is going on. Factor into the Herndon 20170 zip. Signe?
I apologize. Did you say 16% or 60% of the population?
I said both. According to the county's records, their website and their metrics, it is 16.2% of the county population, and it comprises 61.7% of the cases.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, that's why it is stark and troubling that that's going on. And it's going to be important as I move further into my comments here in a few moments. The 20170 zip code, our zip code, continues to have the fifth most cases per 100,000 residents. There are 48 zip codes in the county, and we are right now running fifth. We are about twice as many We have about twice as many cases as the average zip code in the county right now. That is the raw case count of over 1,000 cases out of 41,000 people living in the zip code. That would be about a 2.6% infection rate among the 20170 zip code. So with those two elements in mind, knowing our Latino population is part of our community, and because the 20170 zip code is so affected, I continue to work very closely with the county to try to get expanded testing options here in town and expanded care options here in town, especially targeting our lower income and our Latino communities. I think it's absolutely critical. They are doing things on at HealthWorks on South Eldon Street, but I'm trying to expand that to even more, and that is a constant conversation I'm having with County Health. County Health right now is in the process of hiring the contact tracers that they will need as we move forward, as we currently are in phase 3 and as we continue to move forward. They are, according to Dr. Gloria, they need about 30 contact tracers for every 100,000 people in the county. So that means about 300 are going to be needed. So they're looking at hiring 70 community healthcare workers, 100 case interviewers, 200 contact interviewers, and 35 additional nurses as part of a COVID response. They're in the process of hiring and training those individuals now. But that said, one of the things I intend to fight for is to make sure that we have our fair share in this community working, and Herndon is represented there. The people's immediate needs, according to Dr. Gloria, that are so critical, especially in our lower income sectors of our society, are when we look at potentially quarantining, we need folks to make sure these individuals are getting food, are getting medicine, are getting thermometers, masks, that they have rent assistance. These are all things that the county is working on providing, and I want to make sure, given our case count in this town or in this zip code, that we get our fair share of that activity on this end of the county. So that is something that we need to keep an eye on moving forward. Although the numbers across the board are looking much better, you've seen around the nation where there's some resurgence in some areas that have opened up. We have now opened up. There's more activity. The downtown right now, as I look out my windows, is a buzz with activity right now. In case we get a rebound, I want to make sure that we are as positioned as we possibly can be to protect the folks in this community. So that is at the fore of my mind moving forward. The county health department continues to stress that you're safer at home, that you need to wash your hands, you need to wear your face coverings, you need to social distance. Inform your close contacts if you're not feeling well. And if you're not feeling well, or somebody you know is not feeling well that you've been in close contact with, you need to stay home and quarantine. Those are the guidance coming out of the county. On a good news front, we've had no known exposures on staff in probably over a week. That's probably the first time that's happened since March. We were very aggressive early on, making sure, even before the federal government insisted that we have leave categories to cover folks that were infected or folks with family members or close loved ones who were infected. We were doing that before the federal government mandated that happen. And that was been a very, very successful program, in my humble opinion, to keep our case count low and to keep from spreading among staff. But now we're in the first week of where we have 0 people on that leave category. And I think that is somewhat heartening. From a facility status, operational status, a couple of things I want to draw your attention to. First off is the HMC. The permanent sneeze guards have been installed. They will be there probably well into the future. I don't see them being removed anytime soon. That's part of our social distancing, customer service elements that we have in the HMC. So they were installed. The permanent sneeze guards were just installed. At the town shop, we are picking up yard waste again. Staff picked up 32 tons of yard waste in the first week. The good news is that's about average compared to last year for a June pickup. So I think that's good to note. Because we did not do a spring cleanup, we have been advertising, and you can tell anybody that's questioning about spring cleanup, we're advertising that we are doing special collection for bulk items without charging for the rest of the summer. So we've waived the fees through September 4th, and we will come out, just have to schedule it through DPW, and we will send a team out to do your bulk pickups as on demand. I felt that was probably the easier way to get this done because we were getting a lot of questions about spring cleanup. Parks, we are doing some tennis court repairs. Other tennis courts are opened. The ball fields have been prepped and ready for play. We're working with the leagues to get them back in operation. Some of the other elements, Friday Night Live, we are talking in the chamber right now. We've worked out some of the financial elements of Friday Night Live from the town's perspective. We've worked out some of the risk elements. Right now, we're working on a good social distancing attendance control plan, which I think is critical, that if we were to do anything with Friday Night Live moving forward, we have to make sure that we are observing those things. So I will keep you in tune as I hear more. As of this morning, as of this afternoon, there was no more additional data from the chamber on their social distancing plan, or I would brief that to you, but we're waiting on that right now. Jess, do you want to load the PowerPoint deck real fast? I also wanted tonight to give you a quick update on town finances and revenues as we're closing out fiscal year 20 and moving into fiscal year 21. So I'm waiting for Jess to load the deck that we have. It's going to focus mainly on the general fund, the water and sewer, the golf course funds. Those are in a little bit different place, and we could talk about those at another time. But general fund was probably the thing that was most in our minds moving forward. So slide, please. Just to give a quick recap, we discussed initial 2020 projections on April 7th with you. We had no good data to build the assumptions. We gave some very rough rudimentary numbers on April 7th, and I'll share those again with you in a minute. And we also focused on the main objectives of protecting our workforce, maintaining our critical services. Buying time was a critical thing to get more information on what would be considered a new normal, and try to keep our decision-making to a very incremental level to avoid overcommitting and getting ourselves caught in a bad place. Slide, please. So with that in mind, at the outset of this, as you know, I enacted a hiring freeze. I put a moratorium in overtime. I froze travel and training. Any capital expenditures that weren't grant funded were halted. We capped O&M expenditures, and we clamped down on all procurements across the board. Slide, please. And we employed some other strategies. Our biggest problem was cash flow. As you know, we're in a very good capital position, and we'll talk more about that here in a little bit on another matter. It was about preserving cash and making sure our cash flow was in a good place moving forward. We've been consulting with our experts. We've been watching our fund balance. And we have been looking and evaluating a multiple set of tools, one of which we're going to talk about later tonight. Slide, please. So with that, this chart right here shows briefly what, if you look at the first column, that is the adopted 2020 budget. If you look at the second column, that is what we projected us to end the fiscal year when we made this on April 7th. We've updated the current projections, and the last column is the delta between those two. As you can see right here, we are doing better on local taxes than we projected, to a tune of about $263,000, give or take. We are doing better in permits and fees. We are doing better in fines and forfeitures, charges for service. That's still, it's better than we anticipated in April, but it's still a pretty dramatic hit across the board. Again, as you're looking at this, we are projecting that we're going to finish the 2020 fiscal year, when all is audited and said and done, somewhere around $35 million. And on the expenditure side, we about hit the target of where we thought we were going to be in personnel. We are a little bit higher in O&M. That was because we had some unforeseen pretty significant maintenance items come up that we had to deal with. We are lower than we anticipated on capital moving forward. So quite frankly, right now, and I think the biggest thing you need to look at is if you look at the revenues, use of fund balance, 2020 April projection, we were telling you that we were going to have to hit revenue stabilization for $419,000 to make it through. We upped that to about $500 and some thousand at a later conversation during the budget. As of this morning, and Jenny ran the numbers multiple times for me because I didn't believe it. We are not going to have to touch revenue stabilization to get out of this fiscal year. In fact, we are projecting a very modest surplus coming out of this fiscal year. Again, I don't want to get anybody's hopes up. I don't want to pop champagne corks right now, and we'll talk about why in a minute. But we, through the efforts that the staff has implemented and how closely we managed our fiscal situation, and we got some breaks on some of our tax categories, I think all in all, we're going to end up a little bit better than we'd anticipated. Slide, please. So again, these are all unaudited numbers. If you want to look deeper, one of the biggest elements is B-Poll was very healthy. We talked about that earlier. We knew B-Poll was healthy when we talked in April. Meals tax, again, we did better than we anticipated as we closed out the year. I think that has a lot to do with the outdoor seating. I think it has to do with the fair weather. I think it has to do with some of the businesses actually did pretty well. Pizza places and delivery places that are normally in that realm actually did fairly well. Transient lodging still is something where I consider that to be a very it's did better than we anticipated, but I think that's a big risk area for us. In talking to some of the hotel operators here in town, they are more optimistic than I thought they would be. They think this will turn around more quickly, but yet we don't have any clue of what that looks like. Sales tax, we started getting our sales tax receipts in, and they're going to map pretty closely to what our adopted 2020 budget is. Again, it's just a reminder, the sales tax is a statewide tax that gets allocated to us based on our school-age children. So even when you shop on Amazon, we get a piece of that back because of the school-age children allocation. Slide, please. What I just talked about, we did better than projected in excise taxes. B-Poll was already exceeding budget. We also were able to tap the CARES Act for some elements, about $100,000 in eligible expenditures in last fiscal year. We're going to talk more about the CARES Act here later this evening. But again, I want to highlight that we are not anticipating needing any revenue stabilization reserve to balance the FY20 budget moving forward. It will remain fully funded at $1.8 million. Slide, please. Again, the key drivers, strict spending control by all departments. We deferred costs, and this is a critical point too. We deferred costs. This is not a strategy for the long term, because we were able to move some maintenance out. We were able to move some capital projects out. We were able to defer training our staff. It's not a long-term way to solve our fiscal problems, but it is a short-term lifeboat, and it seems to, at this point, to have worked. So these are not sustainable in the long term. And if we are looking at this being a long-term issue, we're going to have to look at our service offerings and make adjustments to be able to bring some of the maintenance back online, to bring some of the training back online and the like. Slide, please. So as I said, that's FY20. If you remember, we had 3 issues that we were looking at initially. FY20, getting out of it and escaping it with the limited amount of damage. I think we've managed our way through that okay. Now we're looking at 21. So the same concepts apply, that we're managing our way through this moving forward. As you remember, we adopted a budget at $38.8 million, but we sequestered $5.5 million in capital and O&M. We've also been measuring how we spin up our services during the shutdown. Case in point, we are looking at everything through a prism of what is its effect on the budget, what are our risk exposures, what are the legal ramifications of doing this, and we are spinning these things up through a very distinct gating system to bring those things back online. Friday Night Live is going through that gating system as well as we're spinning those things up. That's what we need to continue to do. We are working on the revenue targets right now. We don't have them yet, but as you recall, once we set the revenue targets, positive results will enable us to release some frozen items. Negative results, we'll have to look at other cuts. That's one of the reasons why we're having the conversation later tonight about restructuring our debt. Slide, please. As we look forward, I know a conversation came up, and I was asked by several of you during the budget about how much time do we need to understand what the new normal looks like. It's going to take a while, and I'll tell you why. We don't yet know what the effect of COVID is on real estate taxes, especially commercial real estate. We don't know the effect of COVID on BPOL. Now, we built about a $1.1 million cushion into the budget for next year, but still, we don't know what that effect is going to be. How charges for services, once we start bringing some of the Parks and Rec programs back online, how that's going to look is still an unknown. We don't know the duration of the economic impacts. One of the things that, and talking to our restaurant owners, that I'm hearing is that they're missing their lunch crowd. Is teleworkers are staying home and teleworking. They aren't coming into the restaurants. The lunch crowd, a robust lunch crowd, is very important to us maintaining the number of restaurants that we have. We had 100, before COVID, we had 120 restaurants in town, and they were driven because they had a lunch and a dinner crowd. And that enabled that to happen. At the height, before COVID, we were bringing 18 to 20,000 workers into town every day that were in those restaurants, that were paying the meals tax. So we don't know the long-term effects of this, especially as businesses are looking at their future. Are they going to just stay teleworking? Are they going to do a hybrid? There's a million decisions that are going to affect how this looks moving forward, but we can't anticipate right now. So again, staying the course and getting the data of what that new normal looks like is critical. Another thing is the uncertainty of the COVID-19 cases in Northern Virginia. We are opening up. People are getting much more relaxed. I don't see a whole lot of mask wearing looking out my window right now. Will cases spike? And if they spike, how's the governor going to react? These are things that we cannot possibly anticipate right now, but we have to be as flexible as we possibly can moving forward to make sure that we can manage our way through this. So again, the philosophy that you all allowed us to pursue during the budget discussions was to fiscally manage our way through this crisis without overcommitting. We are doing that. It's worked so far in FY20. We're hopeful that it will work also in FY21. We are preserving our fund balance and trying to keep a strong fiscal position moving forward for a multitude of reasons. And we are restricting expenditures as much as we possibly can for the foreseeable future. But there is a point where we're going to have discussions. If this prolongs into too long, we might have to tack our strategy a little bit and look at our service offerings and make some room for some of these activities to come back online that are necessary for a healthy organization to pursue. So with that, Madam Mayor, I will take any questions on the myriad of data I just unloaded on you all.
Thank you, sir. Are there questions for the town manager? Madam Vice Mayor.
Thank you. When you discussed, Mr. Sheila Olam, when you discussed, Mr. Town Manager, the spring cleanup and that people could ask for bulk, are they available to do that online? In the past, when you did bulk, you had to go in.
I would suggest they call the Department of Public Works to schedule. It would be easier to do it that way. Then we can do about 10 to 12 a day, give or take, and we'll give them a slot. But it'll also give us a chance to interact with them and tell them what is permissible for bulk, what isn't. Like, for instance, large electronics, the old big screen TVs, we can't take. But we can take, furniture, we can take some other things. And it'll allow the staff to sit down and have a conversation with the folks just so they know what is available to be picked up.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions for the town manager on all of the data he just shared? And I'm also going to ask if you're a council member, if it is all possible to have your video on, we would appreciate that. Did I see Ms. Friedrichs? Did I see your hand? Okay, yes, ma'am.
One of the things that you referred to earlier had to do with the Hispanic population having an excessive infection rate in Herndon, in the whole county.
In the county. They don't drill down to the demographics by zip code, but you can extrapolate some things, I think, in the numbers.
So is there anything we can do as a town to increase, there's already access to care through HealthWorks, I'm gathering, but are people aware of that, and are they aware of the social distancing and mask wearing needs, and are they aware of what phase we're in and all that kinds of thing? Are we getting that out for them other than on online? Is there
the health department is getting the word out, but I don't think it's been nearly effective. I know the Herndon police initially took all of the county health material, translated it, and we're passing it out up in the areas where we have a large congregation, like McDonald's, 7-Eleven, and like they're passing out the information. I know when the police actually went and helped with a food distribution up at McDonald's, I want to say a couple weeks back, and Maggie started passing out masks because she had a lot of masks in her car and she was just giving them out. This is something that's very much on Dr. Gloria's mind. As I said earlier, the food, the pharmacy, the thermometers, masks, and rent assistance are very important for us to keep people. They're trying to get people to comply to stay quarantined so they can get through this without spreading it. I have another meeting with Gloria this week, and I will certainly talk to her about what they can do on those fronts, on just the information campaign, what they can help us with on those things. I know Ann Curtis has also sent out some things. I'm getting texts from her right now. We're doing it through all of our town news website, e-newsletter, social media. We're doing it there. And we, again, the message board up here about masking up is in both English and Spanish, the big message board under our control. We can look at other ways, and I'm open to any suggestions anyone might have of how to more effectively communicate. I think this is that important because that, like I said, when you look at those numbers, when you go to the counties, they have a whole series of graphs and charts and numbers up there on their website. And as you look at those, that's very stark when you see those numbers, especially, I'm sorry to say, Councilmember Baker, in a pie chart, that it truly jumps off the chart at you. So again, anything we can do to spread the word, I'm all ears. And if we're not doing what we need to be doing, please, I would love to hear from you because I think it's that important.
Are the documents that the police had translated into Spanish available to on our website? Is there any way they can be made available to us to send out to our networks?
I'm unsure, but we can certainly look into that. Like I said, we have both the chief and Ann right now are on, and they're reminding me of things very quickly, trying to keep me informed. I'm not sure, but we can certainly let you know. I can follow up with you later on that.
I would appreciate that because I think first of all, we all know different people, and then we know different people who know other people. So,
100%.
Probably an informal way of getting them out would work maybe even better than the formal way. Anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this is Lisa Merkel. I was going to add, and I apologize if this was said, I know that a lot of our faith groups are also trying to get the word out through some of their services as well. So I appreciate that. Any other comments from anyone who hasn't spoken? I guess it's actually questions for the town manager from anyone we haven't heard from yet. And if not, then I think I see the Vice Mayor once again. Oh, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, Mr. DeLaguila.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for the record, my video streaming has been glitchy at times, so that's why I'm cutting the video in and out. But I can hear everything, so appreciate the consideration there.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
This is Councilmember DeLaguila. Mr. Ashton, thanks for that again. Regarding two things, actually, slide 10,
Okay.
the impact, I think we can, I know it's going to be hard, but I think we can anticipate what's going to happen, right? And I think we just got to swallow the pill and anticipate that. I mean, B-pole may look good now, outdoor seating, it's good. Real estate might look good. Commercial is going to tank. So I think we do know, we can make some assumptions on what it's going to look like over the rest of the half of this year. And I think we got to just prepare for that. And I don't know what you need from me or us, this council, but I think we just got to put some hard numbers down on paper and let's just proceed with that plan going forward. I do think we can anticipate.
If I can just comment, how y'all can help me on that is, I think we need to first, I have a plan, and I want to share it with you, but I think before I start putting more specificity to that plan, I think we need to talk about this from a services related question. So what services do we need to tack back on? Which ones do we want to move forward on? We need to be looking at these things more and how we're affecting our residents and our businesses and how we're servicing them. And I think once we look at that, then we can then walk our way back to just exactly what you're asking for.
No, I appreciate that. So again, is that in context, or is the goal to not touch any of the sequestered funds, or is it, touching any of the revenue stabilization? I mean, just help me understand where the pain point is for you, because I think we need to not only prepare for it, but there's a lot of people asking a lot of questions. So it'll help us, how bad do we need to prepare for it? Okay. I think blowing through the sequestered is probably a gimme at this point. I don't know if that's where you are. Hitting the stabilization fund, I think we're going to have to blow through that. That, for me, that's just, I think we have to proceed with those assumptions and then work back from there. So I don't know, it wasn't clear for me where you were on that.
Okay. So to that point, when we were looking at the other strategies, and we're going to discuss this later tonight, is a debt restructuring plan that has another $700,000 worth of savings attached to it. And we're going to go into that later. Just another way to take that 5.5 to 6.2, because again, going back to some of the comments you made during the budget, which were very good, at having a discussion about this could be much worse. And we need to be preparing for much worse. I think it was a prudent tack. We want to, it goes back to that old saying, hope for the best, but expect the worst. And I think that's how this whole concept behind sequester came into being. Again, the problem with the sequester, as most of you know, or probably all of you know, is that it's an unsustainable forever position to be in, because there's so much maintenance money tied up in it. There's so much training money tied up in it. And the things that we could possibly defer, we're doing that we can't defer forever. You can't kick cans down the road until they all pile up in the corner. So at some point, and again, I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. We need to have a conversation about services moving forward. What is the vision of those services moving forward? And then realigning ourselves where we're doing our maintenance, where we're doing our training, but we're doing it with the eye in mind of the services you all want to provide.
And sorry, one last question. Thanks for that clarification. So in terms of the actual reserve fund, which I call operating expense, right? Your monthly expenses. I think we had a 20% or a 2.5 month cushion there. Going forward, are we digging into that, or are we maintaining that, or are we looking to potentially add to that during this sort of movement of dollars?
I would think that first and foremost, if we do realize that modest surplus in 20, that will trickle through and go back into the pot. So all of our reserve funds, which there are 5 major reserve funds out there. The revenue stabilization will remain fully funded. We have a capital reserve fund that has no cap to it, and we throw money in there, and we're anticipating some major capital purchase. So it's sitting there. We have 2 other reserve funds that are just relatively small. And then we have the undesignated fund balance, or the unassigned fund balance, which is sitting at 30%, 29% of our operating budget at the beginning of the fiscal year. So whatever the operating budget is, 30% of it. By policy, we adopted a 20% floor that we can go under, but there's got to be it's a very strict way to do that. It's kind of like you borrow from your IRA to do something. That's kind of what that, to put it into some sort of terms that would make sense to most. So all those reserve funds are untapped. We're going to escape 20 with them untapped. Again, when Jenny first told me about it over the weekend, I did not believe her. And I don't think she believed her either. And she told me she ran the numbers 8 more times just to make sure that the numbers were the numbers. Again, these are unaudited. We won't know for sure for a few more weeks as to where we are, but this is where we're projecting now with better information. But again, that's behind us. How we look moving forward with some of the newer challenges we have, that's, I think, to your point, that's when we need to start looking at some of these services, looking at some restructuring with an eye on making sure we are still being able to maintain our things and train our people and so on and so forth.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Town Manager, it sounds like this is going to be a policy discussion that we have at a future work session, I'm guessing, to sort of
100%.
Things. Okay. Thank 100%. You. And Madam Vice Mayor, sorry I cut you off earlier because Mr. De Aguila had not spoken yet. So go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to chime in on our Hispanic community. And my older son lives in Four Seasons and has quite a few friends and neighbors of the Hispanic origin. And he asked me several weeks ago, is the town doing something? Are they knocking on doors? Because he noticed his neighbors and the individuals around when he goes for walks several weeks ago started wearing masks. So I think that was a direct result of our officers going out among the area and passing out the information. So I just wanted to throw that in, that people living over there have expressed that they've noticed that. So I think that's a good thing.
Anything to get that word out, I think is gold. It's treasure.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with a question for the town manager? Mr. DeCall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Bill, one more suggestion on the same note about the, spreading the word out to Hispanic community. Whatever electronic signs we have, if we can use all of them and put in a, different intersection, not only in English, but if we can put the notices, in Spanish also, like mask up or something, probably that would, people already know, but that would serve a constant reminder on people. Oh, okay, I need to wear a mask. Those kind of things. Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. We can redeploy. We have them out all over town with messages about COVID. We can redeploy and reprogram. That's certainly something we could do.
Great. Thank you. Anything else? Oh, okay. Thank you, guys. So moving on to our agenda items, I will ask the clerk if we have received comments for the record for any items that are listed on the agenda tonight.
Madam Mayor, I've not received any comments.
Okay, on any of our items?
On any of the items, no ma'am.
Okay, thank you. We tried to make that a little more succinct since it got a little confusing last time asking on every item. So I wanted to start off with that. And I do believe we have a disclosure from a council member for an item on the agenda this evening. Is that correct, Madam Town Clerk?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Pursuant to sections 2.2, 3112, B23, and 2.2, 3115G of the Code of Virginia, Vice Mayor Olem has provided to the town clerk's office a signed statement for the record stating that she is the owner of commercial property in North Augusta, South Carolina. The group she leases to is in the Verizon Global Real Estate Division of Cellco Partnership, doing business as Verizon Wireless out of Temple Terrace, Florida. The statement indicates that she is able to participate in the discussion and action on the lease amendments on the next two public hearing items, which are the town's 3rd Street and Alabama Drive water towers, fairly, objectively, and in the town's public best interest, in that the appropriate disclosures have been filed with the town clerk's office and the town attorney's office. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. So that does bring us to our public hearing items. I will call the first public hearing, which is on ordinance 20019, a second lease amendment for Cellco Partnership doing business as Verizon Wireless for the town's 3rd Street water tower, which was continued from our March 10th and then April 14th public hearings. And I believe we have Tammy Chastain here, who is our Deputy Director of Public Works, for the staff report. We'll give her a chance to join us. There she is.
All right. Hello, Tammy Chastain, Deputy Director of Public Works. This is the second lease amendment, and as you mentioned, it is a continuance from March and April agenda meetings. This is for Verizon Wireless on our 3rd Street water tower. This is in order for them to make some changes to some of their equipment and ancillary equipment. Mostly they'll be replacing 7 of their existing 12 antennas and then adding a few other items as well that are for the antennas. We are adjusting changing the equipment list as well on this to allow for a size that goes up to a certain amount. That way it gives them a little bit more flexibility as technology changes, that so that it's more of an up to an amount as instead of just a very specific size for some of these items. But that is what this one is for. It's for distribution boxes, equipment panels, equipment cabinets. There is no change to the lease as it is, and they'll continue to pay the rent as they do. And that is pretty much it for this 3rd Street water tower amendment.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions for Tammy? And I did want to note that there's a representative you see here who is called in, who represents Verizon Wireless, if you're wondering who our guest is. So are there any questions for Tammy? Mr. DeCall.
My question to Tammy is, has anything changed from our last discussion?
No, this is, okay. Yep.
All right, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Anybody? And try to make sure I don't miss anybody. Okay, thank you very much. Our next public hearing is a resolution 20G18 to authorize I skipped ahead. Ordinance 20040 to approve a second lease amendment to Cellco Partnerships doing business as Verizon Wireless at the Alabama Drive water tower. And once again, Tammy Chastain has probably a pretty similar staff report.
Yes, ma'am. This is Tammy Chastain, Deputy Director of Public Works. Second lease amendment for Verizon at our Alabama Drive tank. This one is also very similar, where we've got the up to size limits, and we are revising and adding to the equipment list. Just to note, it says the generator enclosure and equipment shelter. This does not add that in there. It's already there, but somewhere along the line, it never got added to the equipment list, but it was in the amendment. So this just also corrects the equipment list for that, and also changes so that they can change the height of their antennas up to a certain amount, as well as the ancillary equipment necessary for operating those antennas. Same as the last one, the rent will stay the same, escalate as we have it put in the amendment. So that's all for this one. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Chastain from anyone? Madam Vice Mayor.
And I believe this water tower, this is Vice Mayor Olin, this water tower is not used as a water tower, but just to help the antenna on it. So
Yes, ma'am. Right now it's not used as a water tower. Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Tammy.
Sure thing.
We'll see you next week.
You got it.
Our next item is Resolution 20G18 to authorize the reserve of fiscal year 2020 funding for capital and ongoing projects and for outstanding encumbrances. It's one of my favorite accountant words. I'm going to recognize Jenny Tripoli, who is our Director of Finance, and she joins us for the staff report.
Okay. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of Town Council. Sorry for the delay. This item and the next item are procedural. This gives us the authorization to spend money on items that were not quite completed as of June 30th. I apologize. I knew that was going to happen. It took how many weeks for them to do it? I apologize. Allows us to reserve funds for projects that were not quite done at June 30th. And we kept this very restricted to items that were funded through external sources like grants, items that were already far enough along that it would be more expensive to cancel them, et cetera. So again, this is procedural. It doesn't mean on July 1st or it's July 7th, we're going to immediately spend all of this money. It just allows us, it gives us the legal right to continue spending while we close the year on these capital projects, on a couple of these general fund projects, so that we don't run afoul of the appropriations. So that really covers 5 and 6. And I do intend to come back to you in September with a reconciliation of these items because we are watching everything so very carefully.
Okay, so Jenny, if I understand it, then did you give concurrent staff reports on item 5 and item 6 just now?
I apologize. Yes, basically,
no, that's okay.
The first one reserves the funding as of June 30th, and then the second one is the FY21 amendment to appropriate those estimates.
Okay, so great. So just for the record, I want to be clear that we can ask questions right now on either the resolution 20G18, which is item number 5, or ordinance 20041 to consider amending the fiscal year 21 adopted budget because they go hand in hand. So questions for Ms. Tripoli, anybody? No? All right. Okay, well, thank you very much. That was efficient. I like it. That brings us to our general items. The first item is Resolution 20G19 to change the meeting schedule for the Town Council work session in August 2020. There's not really a staff report, so I'll just explain that National Night Out was rescheduled this year because of COVID-19, and we had scheduled to have our work session on Wednesday, August 5th. So we are looking to move it back to the regular date of Tuesday, August 4th, since there's no reason to move it to Wednesday. And things are confusing enough, I think, right now. So are there questions for council on that item? Okay, with concurrence of council, can we place this item on consent agenda for next week? Does that work? Any objections? Mr. DeCall.
My one question, Madam Mayor. So the National Night Out is rescheduled to what date?
I believe it has been pushed to October, but I don't have...
Tuesday, October 6th, Madam Mayor.
All right. I knew someone would know.
Okay.
So stay tuned. So then I guess we will probably have to look at our agenda and see if there's a change to be made at that point as well. But we will get to that later. Any other questions on the August date change? No. Okay. Thanks for that clarification, Mr. DeCall. Next up is a resolution 20G20 to approve the restructuring of some of the town's debt. And I'm going to actually throw this to the town manager while Jenny Tripoli, our director of finance, is going to, we have some representatives from Davenport who will be joining us. So we're going to try to give them time to join. Mr. Town Manager.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Bill Ashton, Town Manager. While Jenny and Kyle come on and we get the presentation ready to go, during the budget discussions and adoption, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, Councilmember Delagula brought up a very valid point of what if the $5.5 million is not enough. We're sequestering that. If it isn't enough, where else can we go? At that point, we were talking personnel. We were talking that being the next logical place. At that point, staff had only started having discussions with Davenport and ultimately with Chris Culp, our bond attorney, who's also on this call right now. And we just had started those conversations about potentially restructuring some of our debt to increase the cash flow issues. And why is this important to have this discussion right now? Well, first and foremost, we have a major debt service payment due at the beginning of August. So that's a very decisive action that will occur right early in the fiscal year where we're going to have to pay that. Number two is we have an environment of highly favorable interest rates and some very good options for us to restructure this debt. And there are many other valid reasons, and I know Kyle's going to get into them in a few minutes. He's here tonight, as is Chris Culp, to discuss this approach. Before I turn it over, we need to remember that if this is a desirable approach for you, we'll need to vote on it next week because we need to get in front of the August. We have to close this deal before August 1. So again, we need to be a little bit more flexible and adaptable with this than we normally would. I would be bringing this to you. We'd be talking about it, putting it on RFP, so on and so forth. A lot of this stuff is happening in parallel simultaneously, and I'm sure Kyle will cover that as well. So with that, Madam Mayor, I will let Jenny chime in, and if she wants to just throw it to Kyle, she may, or whatever she wants to do. Jenny?
I will turn it over to Kyle and Chris Culp.
Good evening. It's nice to see both of you.
Thank you. Good evening, all.
I think I just needed to unmute myself. Can you hear me, Mayor?
Yes. Yes.
Very good. Very good. Thought I hit the button already, but apparently didn't. So again, nice to see you all electronically. Certainly we'd prefer to see you in person, but this being the situation that we're in, we appreciate this opportunity. And again, so that's with Davenport, town's financial advisor, and then Chris Culp, obviously with Huntley Andrews Kurtz, separate firm, but sort of our colleague in this sense, our partner on the legal side. And what you see up on the screen is a presentation that we'll walk through. But I think even before we get in, I appreciate the comments at the beginning of the meeting in terms of where you as a town have preliminarily and unaudited, look like you're going to land for this fiscal year. I think as your outside advisor, we'll give you a lot of kudos as a council. And especially on the management side, between the town manager, finance director, and others within your town staff to have been able to manage through that last quarter of the fiscal year, knowing how dependent you are as a town on meals taxes, on lodging taxes, those types of revenue streams that have been very, very impacted by this overall crisis. The ability to come in at the end of the year and largely keep and hopefully even add to your existing reserve levels is something to sort of worth a little bit of applause here in the short run. That being said, and we understand this by virtue of talking with you and many other local governments across the region and across the country, we're a long way from being out of the woods, at least in our perspective. We're not economists, we're certainly not public health people. But in our role as your financial advisor and frankly as advisor to a lot of local governments, we certainly see ourselves, meaning you as a town, having made it through the first phase of this, but we really do see a potentially very challenging path going forward. I think town manager used a phrase earlier in terms of, hoping for the best and planning for the worst. And I think that is part and parcel of what you'll see tonight in terms of our refunding strategy and how we think about this, how we take advantage of the fact that rates are very, very low, take advantage of the fact that you as a town have earned 3 AAA credit ratings. That is the highest possible that you can have as a local government. And part of what we're going to talk about tonight is not just ensuring that we maintain our reserves, which are a very important part of maintaining those credit ratings, but also making sure that we are managing the cash flows for this upcoming budget year, meaning the one that we started, I guess, 7 days ago, but budget years into the future. So with all that as a little bit of background, I realize we're still on the first page here, so we can go to page number 1 in terms of presentation. And again, I'm trying not to repeat myself here, but so much, I think you know who we are, so we can probably skip past that. But again, we'll note for you and any members of the public that are watching, you know this, Madam Mayor and others, you have those credit ratings. And so what we want to do is make sure that we do everything in our power to maintain those and certainly take advantage of that by virtue of this refund. So with that, I think we can go to page number 2. It was very helpful to be on the sort of the front end of this council meeting. Commentary from town manager as well as the council members on the importance of the reserves really can't be understated. We talk about those AAA credit ratings. Rating agencies are looking at any variety of different factors. You can kind of boil them down: management, the economy, finances, and debt. Somewhat, or finance piece of that, their overall criteria is A, very, very important. It's about 30% of the overall rating. And B, it really ties back to, in a large respect, your fund balance and what those fund balance levels are. So again, we'll get into in a page or two here what exactly the strategy is talking about. But I think in fairness, given it's been a little while since we've been in front of you, we wanted to underscore the importance of fund balance, underscore the fact that you have very strong policies that were set up, whether you and ourselves and others knew this was coming or not. Certainly we didn't, but set up to give you multiple layers of sort of defense in terms of reserves and liquidity before you really had to get to what we view and what the rating agencies view as sort of the sacrosanct level of fund balance, which is that unassigned fund balance, the 20% level. So hopefully we won't need to get to that point. But I think to several of the council members and certainly the town manager's comments at the beginning of this meeting, we've got a long way to go, and we're only 7 days into this fiscal year. So to that end, what we've been working on really very quickly, I think Bill pointed this out very importantly in terms of, as we think about fiscal year 2021, you and all of your peers have just an incredible amount of uncertainty as we think about that year. Again, one of the overall strategies to make sure we conserve fund balance, conserve liquidity, because we just don't know what's going to happen this year, and certainly to make some projections. We understand all of that. But ultimately, there are more variables in play right now than we have seen in a very long time. And so if we go to the next page, what we're really talking about in the short run here is looking at our existing general fund debt profile, and really for the moment focusing on the general fund because it is the fund that has had the biggest impact by virtue of this overall crisis, and saying what are some strategies, or what is a strategy that will allow us to take advantage of the fact that rates are in essence as low as they've ever been, meaning borrowing rates, using our very strong credit ratings, which will make us as attractive as you can possibly be to lenders out in the marketplace, and use those various tools within our toolbox to help lessen the potential blow to fund balance in 2021, but do so in a responsible way that when it is viewed from the outside by the rating agencies, by lenders, will be viewed as prudent, as responsible, as something that is in line with a AAA rated local government, while at the same time protecting our fund balance. So what we show you here on this page is our outstanding general fund debt. It totals at the moment about $12 million in that range. You can see the breakout there on the right-hand side between principal and interest. We historically have been blessed to have achieved as a town very low interest rates. But again, given the highly unusual circumstances the last 3 months, rates have dropped even lower. And so we're going to try and take advantage of that. As you look at this page visually, you look at that graph on the left-hand side, what this is really showing is what your existing general fund debt payments. So for the moment, we're not talking about water and sewer, other self-supporting funds per se, really focus on the general fund. And that graph on the left-hand side shows you what those payments look like as we sit here today before we do any refunding, any reworking of the debt profile. And what you see, if you're a visual person, you can see it right there with the numbers, is that we have a roughly level annual debt service payment through fiscal year 21 into 22, 23, and 24. And then we've got a very substantial decline when we get to 2025. While 2025, when you're looking at a graph in a table like this, may seem like it's going to happen relatively quickly. I think what we all understand right now is as we're thinking about how we manage through 2021, this crisis, 2025 is a long way away. So what we're going to talk about doing is taking a portion of that existing debt. There's about $12 million outstanding right now. We're going to work with about $6 million. And that $6 million, we'll show you the next page, is tied to a couple specific existing bond issues. And we are going to look to refinance that. When we say refinance, what we really mean is take it from a higher rate to a lower rate. We're also going to look to what we would call reshape it. We use the term restructure, reshape. We'll show you visually what that looks like. But really the goal is to A, bring the rate down, and B, get ourselves to a new lower debt service level beginning immediately in 2021. And to the town manager's point, hopefully immediately beginning about August 1st, less than a month from now, such that you as a town council and certainly town management have some more what I'll call breathing room to manage through certainly fiscal year 21, but then also into fiscal year 22, 23, and there forward, knowing that there's going to be short-term effects of this, but certainly we would expect there's going to be some longer-term, sort of spillover and fallout from this crisis. And just no one knows exactly what that's going to look like right now. So if we go to the next page, we'll give you just a couple visuals here. I've mentioned this a couple times in terms of interest rates. I think many of you probably know this by virtue of watching the news, maybe in the financial markets. But
I'm sorry, Kyle, your audio is cutting out just a little bit.
Okay, let me move a little closer to the screen here.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay.
I believe it is.
All right, hopefully that works out. But again, from an interest rate perspective, we are in essence as low as we've ever been. So this page here shows tax-exempt interest rates, basically since the year 2000 or thereabouts on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, we just kind of blow that scale up a little bit. And what we've really seen since March is a lot of volatility, but generally speaking, rates have dropped to extraordinarily low levels, and so we're looking to take advantage of that. On the next page, we will show you taxable interest rates. We're showing these two different pages on purpose because a portion of our refunding will be on a taxable basis, and a portion of our refunding will be on a tax-exempt basis, and that just ties back to how the tax code sort of says we have to deal with refinancings in different ways. Of the $6 million, or roughly, that we're going to be refinancing, about $5 million will be done on a tax-exempt basis, and about $1 million will be done on a taxable basis, again, as it's dictated by the tax code as it stands today. So in either situation, whether it's tax-exempt, whether it's taxable, those rates are bouncing off, again, about as low as they've ever been. We'll talk about that in more specificity here in the next couple pages. So as we move here to the next page, in terms of what our refunding strategy is, Again, looking to refinance about $6.1 million, primarily in the general fund, conserve our fund balance, reduce the interest rate on the refunded debt, maintain compliance with our financial policies, get to a approximately level annual debt service payment, but one that is substantially lower than what we have right now. We'll show you visually what that looks like and how that works in a couple pages. And so with that, I think we can go to the next page. So we mentioned about $6 million in terms of existing debt is what we'll be looking to refinance. You see the breakout of what that is here in this table in the middle of the page. Your $12 million of existing tax-supported debt is really a variety of, it's about 7 or 8 different existing bond issues, and we kind of lump those all together as we think about it in aggregate. But what we're really doing, working with town staff, with Chris Culp, is analyzing each and every one of those pieces and taking advantage of those opportunities where we have them to refinance, to pay the debt off, and replace it with fixed rate debt that will give us, again, that lower debt service level going forward. One other point we'll make here, average interest rate on this refunded debt is in the high 3% range. We'll talk about the schedule and how we kind of work all this in a couple pages, but we would expect that number to be, we can't guarantee anything, so we don't have final bids yet, but certainly substantially lower than that high 3% range that is the average of the debt we're looking to refund right now. One last point, and then I'll move on, Madam Mayor. The existing debt that we'll be looking to refund is primarily in the general fund. You see that on this page here is about $5.6 million in the general fund. It so happens that a number of those you see on the page, there are 2010 bond issues, also had small pieces that were in the cemetery fund, in the golf fund, and what we would propose to do for any variety of reasons, a lot of it has to do with just sort of efficiency of cost, is to kind of lump all of this together in terms of one package. So what we're primarily looking at is the general fund side of things, but there's going to be a little bit of a piece or a tail on the cemetery, about $53,000, and on the golf fund, about $380,000 or thereabouts. So not particularly large in the grand scheme of things. But again, the idea is to get this all cleaned up while we are going through the process. So with that, I think we can go to the next page. So we've alluded to this a couple times already, so hopefully with some lead in, this will make some sense. But again, if you're a visual person, what this graph on the right-hand side of the page is showing is a before and after of our general service. Again, before we do any refinancing and reshaping, and then what we think it will look like after, and that's represented here in this graph. So the brown line on the graph on the right-hand side is your existing debt service payments. Those are in the range of about $1.7 million or thereabouts for the next couple of years. If indeed we move forward with this, if indeed we get nice results from the banks that we'll talk about here in a couple minutes, that payment would drop from about $1.75 million down to around $1 million beginning immediately in fiscal year 2021. So the town manager mentioned about $700,000 or thereabouts of cash flow relief in 2021. And that is indeed what he was referring to there in terms of that debt service payment for 21 goes from about $1.7 million down to about $1 million. Importantly, what we have looked to do as we kind of work with those strategies is bear in mind that we will likely have some spill-on effects going into 22, 23, et cetera, meaning fiscal year. And so what we've tried to do here is to just flatten off, bring our whole annual debt service level down to a new lower flat level of about $1 million plus or minus. You can see in the out years here with some estimates. We're about $1 million in 2021, in the range of about $1.1 million than in 2022, again, using some planning estimates for the moment. So what we've tried to do is to flatten things out, avoid any spikes in the future. Sometimes we hear about refunding or restructuring. There will be sort of debt service spikes in the future whereby you get a short-term sugar high from a cash flow standpoint, but you end up having to kind of climb the mountain again in terms of debt service payments. We've really tried to avoid that. And if indeed this is something that is attractive to council, and will get good results, you would not be in that situation. You'd have a predictable level annual payment that is at a much lower level than you are right now. What you see here is we have indeed reshaped the profile of it. So instead of having that very sharp downhill slope, we end up with that flat level. And so what that means is we've changed the timing of some of those payments. We've moved some payments back. But what we've not done on purpose is to shift back the final maturity of the debt that we are refunding. And so while the overall shape of the curve becomes less of a curve and more just a plateau, what we are not doing is extending the final maturity of any of the debt. We're just moving the shape of the payments, if you will, within that existing time period, and sort of keeping the ability to have that decline in the future when hopefully we have worked through this crisis as you get out into fiscal year, basically 29 and 30, to ensure that you've got some decline there in the future, and as well have that annual predictability. And so when we do that, we look at what's called a present value calculation. What a present value is, and many of you probably know this, but just for clarity's sake, what a present value really does in this instance is it takes into account not just the aggregate amount of dollars that are paid over the life of the loan, but it takes into account when those payments are made. The theory being a dollar that is paid today is more valuable in essence, or a dollar that you would have today is more valuable than one in the future. And so given our estimates that we've run for planning purposes, we'll talk about when we get actual rates back, they'll be very soon. But the estimates we've run shows on a present value basis that this overall general fund transaction ends up being about a break even, which means that when you take into account the fact that we'll be paying fewer dollars up front, meaning fiscal year 21, 22, 23, out into 25, but we will be paying a couple more dollars when we get to 27, 28, 29. Those are payments that are further out. You do what we call present value, that stream of cash flows back, and it gets us back to about a break-even level. And so you say, all right, why are we doing that? And again, just to reiterate, it is very much part and parcel with making sure that we've got tools in your collective toolbox to conserve as much as possible that existing fund balance in those various reserves, and help you manage through what is an immediate near-term crisis in fiscal year 2021. Hopefully it doesn't flow through to 22, but certainly we expect there will be some spill-on effects. So with that is in essence, from a visual perspective, what we're talking about, really flattening out, bringing the interest rate down, and helping to hopefully conserve some fund balance, give some more flexibility as you think about 21 and future years. So with that, we can go to the next page. So the town manager mentioned we've in essence kind of spooled this up, so to speak, very quickly because we do have that August 1st deadline. So as we've been talking with Bill, with Jenny, have sort of understood throughout the cycle of managing through this fiscal year, getting your budget adopted in a, we'll call it, sort of partial sense for fiscal year 2021. What we are really striving to do is to have this all accomplished by August 1st. And so the way we do that is through what we call a competitively bid direct bank loan. This is a strategy the town's used many times in the past. Many of your peers in the region have done something similar. For those of you that were on council a couple of years ago, when we did a larger financing that included some utilities, some other general fund needs, That included a full offering perspective. We went to the rating agencies and had our AAA ratings basically affirmed and or updated. And those bonds were sold. It was a much larger issue than this via a public sale in the public credit markets. We're talking about in this refunding is a little bit different on purpose. And what it allows us to do is to move a little faster. It doesn't require that we go have fresh new ratings with the rating agencies, meaning go get those ratings updated. The banks that will be bidding on this have access to all those reports and understand that you are AAA rated from all those entities. So it's really allowing us to get some more mileage out of those discussions and all the work that went in a couple years ago to have those ratings reaffirmed. What this strategy, we call this direct bank loan, allows us to do is get some more mileage out of that process without necessarily having to go through a new full-blown rating update presentation, et cetera, like we went through a couple years ago. And so the way we go about this is a what we call bank loan. So instead of selling securities in the public credit markets, commercial banks will be providing a bid or multiple bids for each of these, basically $6 million of outstanding debt that we're looking to refund. It's a competitive process. The RFP went out a couple weeks ago. It is due tomorrow afternoon, so we'll have those results very soon. In basically 24 hours, we should know what those results look like. We should note that none of those bids coming are binding in any way to town. So if for some reason we don't get something that we like collectively, you as a council or as your advisors, et cetera, if we don't get something we like, your hands are not bound in any way. And so it's helpful from that standpoint in terms of we're able to get those results in, understand what banks are interested in providing a loan. I'm going to use that term loan. So we'll understand what banks are interested in providing that loan. We will be able to very quickly synthesize what those results look like and have prepared for you for next Tuesday. So basically in a week, the results of that bidding and ultimately what the interest rates look like, what the terms and conditions, and what the resulting savings and payment levels would look like if indeed we decide to go forward. So that's what we mean when we talk about a competitive bidding process. Basically, by the time we meet next Tuesday, we should know, barring a surprise, what banks have bid, what the interest rates are, and we will have been able to make a recommendation to your staff and then ultimately to you as a council in terms of what bank makes the most sense in terms of going forward. If indeed a bank does make sense, we think it will, given what's going on in the marketplace. And you'll see all that. It'll be in a presentation like you've sort of seen tonight with the updates in terms of the actual bids. And there'll be resolutions from Chris Culp, who's also on the line, so to speak, that would allow you to authorize that next Tuesday. So with that, maybe we go to the next page. And that gets to, I think, our next steps. Second line there, we're obviously talking right now, June 7th. I think we walked through the fact that we get our bids in tomorrow. We'll be looking at those very quickly, all in anticipation of having the results, the bids, and the legal documents prepared for you to take action next Tuesday, which would be your last meeting before that August 1st payment deadline that will allow us to capture the savings, the roughly $700,000 or thereabouts that we are in essence counting on in fiscal year 2021. So you see that laid on the schedule here. With your action next Tuesday, we would then look to close very quickly by June 30, which is quick, but is something that we think is very reasonable given sort of the existing institutional knowledge we have, your staff has, and so working with Chris, we think that's all very possible. So, Madam Mayor, hopefully that all made some sense. I realize it's a lot of information short time period, but I would be happy to pause, answer any questions that you have, and any other follow-up that anybody else in the call would like us to walk through.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions for Kyle or for anyone on this item? And also, Mr. Town Manager, if you had anything to add, you are welcome to as well. I think I saw Mr. DeCall. Did you have a question? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Kyle. Great presentation. A few things I just wanted to make sure, for
Pretty, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. I don't know what's going on.
Can you
or at least I am.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, so if you were to look at page, let me get to my page here. It is slide number 8. I think, Councilman, the way to think about and look at that is between fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 24. So basically 4 fiscal years, we're going to free up about $2.4 million. It's another way of saying we're not going to pay $2.4 million for those 4 years that we otherwise would. And then
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay, so between fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 24, we're going to free up, if you can hear me, Councilman, hopefully you can, about $2.4 million, which is another way of saying we will not be paying $2.4 million that we otherwise would if we didn't do anything over that 4-year time period. Fiscal year 2025, our payment ends up being about the same, plus or minus, as it is right now. And then those payments that we've reshaped end up kind of leveling off between 26 and 30. And so it's almost kind of like a seesaw. We shave it down on the front end, we flatten it out on the long end. And so I think the point you're making, the 300,000, is that if you don't present value the payments.
And thank you. That's my question. What is that number, right? I mean, what's the number you're using for the present value? Because this could be skewed. And and where I'm going with this concern is we've got about a week to figure this out, right? Because you're asking us, we're going to be asked to vote on this next week.
Yes, sir.
So these numbers could radically change based upon the proposals you're getting back to, correct?
They could, in theory. In theory, we think they're probably pretty close to looking like what they're going to look like, just given where the market is. We think the overall sort of shape, if you're looking at it visually, it's going to look a whole lot like that. And so within an order of magnitude, certainly it's not going to be exactly what we see right here. It would be a shock if it was. We would expect it's probably going to be somewhere in this range, though.
No, a delta of 2 to 3, maybe 5% would be okay, but beyond that, I think I'd have issue with supporting this going forward. But if you're telling me that they're pretty solid, I mean, I understand why we're doing this, right? We have to address the cash flow problem, right? And freeing this up is great, but my concern is what that out-year cost is going to be. Is it truly going to be in the range that you're projecting come 2025 going forward? Right? That's the real concern I would have. What does that look like on the outside?
Yeah, and again, we appreciate the timing side of it, and that's why we'll have these bids in late tomorrow. And by Thursday morning, we should know something, and we'll be working to get you something for your council package as we can. So again, you can see this in advance of next Tuesday's meeting.
And I guess my question and thank you for that. And my question is, will the public be able to comment on this? I assume, there'll be a chance for the public to comment on this, because I'd imagine there's going to be some questions on this.
Yeah, I mean, with that, I'd probably defer to town manager and.
Yeah, sorry, that was for the town manager.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, there's not a public hearing required, and Chris Culp can echo me on that, but in terms of the policy side of it, I'll defer to Bill.
So this is Bill Ashton, town manager. The legal requirement is not a public hearing. Certainly, we can go above the legal requirement, or we can advertise this for comment as you would just generally send comment in. Madam Town Attorney, what is your take on this?
Town Attorney Lisa Yates, I would agree with you, Mr. Ashton. There is no legal requirement for a public hearing. We can either take public comments at the advertisement that we're going to take public comments at the meeting, but there's not much time to do that. I think probably the most advisable thing would be to accept written public comments through the website like we have been doing. The clerk is letting me know that there can be an ad Friday to occur on Friday. So it would be the pleasure of council.
Are there further questions?
No, I think we need as much information before we make a decision come the 14th. We're talking a week away, right? So,
yep.
Having public input would be helpful. But again, it depends on what numbers we get presented. So I'll just have faith that we get all the data and numbers we need. So thank you.
Mr. Town Manager or Madam Town Attorney, can we get the word out? I'm also going to ask everybody to mute because there's some background noise going on. Can we go through our channels through our PIO's office and try to get the word out about this and why we're looking at it? And I can certainly make sure that I mention at the top of the meeting next week that we would entertain comments on this item if that's possible. Because I agree with my colleague that we need to get as much public input and information as possible.
This is Bill Ashton, Town Manager. We can certainly do something out in news you can use and the other social media channels that we use to push out our information. We can do something on this relatively easily. Once we start getting the numbers involved and what it looks like, we could probably turn around something on Thursday, as early as Thursday. I will yield to Ann Curtis, who I'm sure is furiously typing something to me right now. And we could certainly get her engaged on this matter as early as potentially Thursday.
And strongly encourage written comments as more information is out.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
All right. Thank you. I see Ms. Friedrichs.
I don't know if we've received a copy of the Davenport PowerPoint, but if we don't, can we get it as soon as it's available, just so that we can look at the first estimates ourselves? I mean, I didn't see it on our agenda. Maybe it was there, but if it could be put up there, it would be really helpful.
Yeah, I don't think we had it ahead of time, but we could certainly add it to Granicus for this week, and it'll probably be updated for next week, given additional information that we'll have. So could we do that, Mr. Town Manager?
This is Bill Ashton, Town Manager. Yes, we can certainly do that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Ms. Friedrichs? No? Okay. Anybody else? Make sure I don't skip anybody. No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys, and we'll hear from you before the meeting next week, and we can look forward to this discussion publicly next week. That moves us on to I believe, our last general item, which is resolutions 20-G21 through 20-G27 to ratify the temporary license agreements for use of public property or public right-of-way for temporary outdoor dining between the town and the following establishments: Green Lizard Cycling, Jimmy's Old Town Tavern, Mile 20, Red Kimono, Russia House Restaurant, Sully's Poorhouse, and Zeffirelli's Restaurant. And I will recognize Lisa Yates, our town attorney, for concurrent staff reports on all these items.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Lisa Yates, town attorney. I know it seems like a long time ago now, but back on May 29th, Northern Virginia entered into phase 1 of the phased plan to reopen businesses in the Commonwealth. At that time, the governor had authorized restaurants to operate outdoors at a reduced capacity, and they could be given an ABC license if their operation was in 100 feet of their business. As you recall, in an effort to help and assist town businesses in the reopening, staff really moved quickly and developed a comprehensive application to provide a free temporary outdoor dining permit to any establishment that applied. The application provided for 3 types of outdoor dining scenarios: private property, town sidewalks or right-of-way, and town parking lots. The town received and approved outdoor dining permits on private property for at least 5 establishments, along with private property, along with 16 restaurants in the Duoskin portion of the Herndon Center shopping center. Establishments that requested to use essentially town property were also required to complete an application for a temporary license agreement for the use of town property. An important element that was essential to the town protecting its property was to provide hardened barriers. Those were provided to the individuals that are operating on town property. Under standard town procedures, requests for a license agreement to use town property would have come directly to the council and to be approved after a public hearing, which would have required the entire process to take a couple of months or more for advertising and actually having a public hearing. In order to expedite the process established in phase 1, the town council amended ordinance, our continuity of government ordinance, back on May 26, and authorized the town manager to execute certain instruments to effectuate this outdoor dining, these outdoor dining licenses, subject to final consideration and ratification by town council at the next available public hearing. This is the next available public hearing after the agreements were signed by the parties and the town manager. And so the town council, you must consider now ratification of these 7 temporary license agreements for temporary outdoor dining on town property in order to finalize the approval. Again, as the mayor said, they are Green Lizard Cycling, Jimmy's Old Town Tavern, Mile 20 at Mediterranean Breeze, Red Kimono, Russia House, Sully's Poorhouse, and Zeffirelli Restaurante. These agreements will extend on into early September, immediately following Labor Day, without any further action of town council if you ratify them tonight. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, but that is essentially the contents of the ratification process.
Thank you. What questions do you have for the town attorney? Ms. Friedrichs.
Are we allowed to ratify them tonight? Is that what you said?
I apologize. No, you're not allowed to. It's Tuesday night.
Darn it. Thank you.
Good catch. Other questions for the town attorney on this item? Mr. D'Aguila.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yep.
This is Councilmember D'Aguila. Thank you, Ms. Yates. Question, I'm going to put this out there because it's been asked. I know we're talking about a temporary extension here, but I think we need to think about making this permanent. Everywhere I've gone, where I've walked, people absolutely love this. So what's the process of making this permanent? I'm not talking about this year, but maybe it's something seasonal, between dates or something. Certainly, I'm brave enough to have a beer outside, but not when it's wintertime. So I think what we're looking at here is a potential emergence of some very cool, vibrant draw for the town. So I would ask if it's, the will of the council to start thinking about this as a permanent condition during certain timeframes. And I'd encourage those that haven't to talk to the business owners at these establishments, because they will tell you their customers cannot believe the energy. And again, it's a double-edged sword. There's a lot of people there, but the energy this has created. And I just think this is a potential transformational event for the town here. We could really be looking at a potential draw. We've got a potential new beer garden coming here on Center Street. So I would like us to think about making this a permanent solution. Again, not this year, potentially for next year if it's seasonal. Thank you.
So if I could jump in before we get an answer to that, I think that this is predicated on the state of emergency and loosening of restrictions from the ABC that have made this possible. But I agree with what my colleague said. It certainly has boosted the vibrancy in downtown. And I had planned to bring up the possibility of, at least for this year, looking into, I know we did it for 100 days so that we got past Labor Day, but if it might be possible to extend that through some point in October so that they get the benefit for as long as possible. And I think that just takes simple council action from us. So
Oktoberfest in Herndon. I mean, who would have thought, right? So I guess that's, I appreciate that, Mayor. I think doing that, again, I get why we're able to do it, but that's why I'm suggesting a structure of a permanent solution for this, is what I'm saying.
Yep. So I'm not sure who we're batting that question to. The town attorney, I would suspect.
Yeah, what would it take, I guess? And again, that may not be a discussion for this evening, but I wanted to get out there. If that's kind of the consensus, is that something worth exploring? What it would take to actually make this happen in the town?
So I think I heard the question was, what would that take to make it happen? Regarding the use of, and again, this is Lisa Yates, town attorney, regarding the use of public property, and it's going to essentially depend on the ABC because these permits and the outdoor dining in spaces like parking lots and sidewalks and other rights of way is really only at this point predicated on their ABC license allowing that to occur. It may be the ABC Alcoholic Beverage Control Board extends that or somehow allows permits for that sort of dining. The town already has a process set up to grant outdoor dining to certain, to certain restaurants under certain conditions. So I believe staff would certainly, if we were asked to do that, would certainly be amenable and would provide you with a process for doing that. And the town manager is going to tell us about that.
Well, actually, the town manager is just going to put one more wrinkle in there that isn't an insurmountable wrinkle, in my humble opinion, but I'm sure I'm going to give staff some coronaries when I say this, that several of these locations are on public shared parking spaces, which would mess up the zoning for parking for our downtown businesses. We'd have to clean up some zoning language. We have to clean up some downtown public shared parking agreements. It's not a very clean thing that we're going to be embarking upon. I'm not saying we can't do it. By no stretch am I saying we can't do it. But there's some more devil in those details. Also very concerned, as the attorney pointed out a few moments ago, of ABC and the temporary loosening. Now, that being said, they've loosened some things, and are they going to be able to put that genie back in the bottle once COVID expires, or it goes its natural course, or does whatever it's going to do? I don't know. But certainly, to your point, Councilmember Aguila, and to your point, Madam Mayor, is that I've heard from the restaurant owners too. Mm-hmm. They love it. Actually, it took all of maybe 1 week for Mile 20 to grab me out on Lynch Street and ask, "Can we do this every year?" Yeah. So yeah, there is an interest there, and again, I'm like most other people. There's nothing better than a cold beer outside on a warm day. I mean, I get that. I get that sentiment. So there's just a lot of cleanup work that we'd have to do to prepare this. But if that is something you want us to pursue, we will certainly do that.
If I could, Mr. Town Manager, this may be something to bring up on your CAO call, and maybe me with the mayors and chairs call, because as we've worked through trying to do things as these restrictions have lifted and that sort of thing. I think you're right with some of the ABC regulations in particular. People are not going to want to wind that back, and if there haven't been major problems with some of the changes, maybe they will become permanent, and that is probably something regionally we should see if we can pursue, because it's probably going to take something outside of the local government to make some of these things a possibility. So I'll add that to the list of things to bring up at those meetings. And I saw some other hands. Sheila.
Thank you, Sheila Olam. I just wanted to say that I'm glad we're going through this, but I'm so happy that the town was able to put this in so fast when all this happened. And I think this is the reason why we aren't in as much trouble, because our restaurants were able to carry on and have, not all of them, I understand, but most. And I think it has really made a difference in the livelihood of a lot of our people in town and the sanity of a lot of other people. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I can't keep track of who's already spoken. Is there anybody that hasn't spoken that has questions? Mr. DeCall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was about to ask the same question, whether we can extend the permit. So, Madam Mayor, you already asked that question. And then Mr. De La Guela brought even a bigger topic, that what if we do this, every single year? So I definitely support both extending this now and also maybe finding a way to allow them for outdoor sitting next year or the year after as well. Maybe, Memorial Day to Labor Day, something like that. But I think we definitely should look for the avenues to do that, because that will attract more people and that will support our local businesses as well. So I absolutely agree, both of you.
Thank you. And then I think I saw Sigby's hand. Mr. McKenna, did I see your hand too, or no? Don't scratch your face. I'll call on you. Okay.
I wanted to add sort of pylon, I guess I would say. I've had a lot of comments, including my husband, but also my neighbor across the street told me that there is an area in Virginia that she goes to where you can walk around with alcohol outside from business to business. And I will find out from her what that
we know.
area is. You know what it is?
That's Manassas on Fridays.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you already know. All right. Well,
Yes.
Let's see what we can do. The other thing we could do is, maybe we don't really need to go into detail on this, but we could do it on weekends, because that might solve some of the parking issue. Anyway, love it. Thank you.
All right. So are there any other comments on the ratifying of these license agreements? And then it certainly sounds like we've got a couple of discussion items ahead of us on the same kind of topic. Any other questions or comments about this? All right. Thank you very much. Could we place this on the consent agenda for next week? Do we have concurrence of council? Okay, great. That brings us to our discussion item, which is the CARES Act funding, the federal funding for expenses related to COVID. And I believe Jenny Tripoli is going to rejoin us. I hope the puppies are still there.
Yeah. Well, they're sleeping for right now.
Okay.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of Town Council. Once again, this is Jenny Tripoli, Director of Finance. I just wanted to give you a quick update on the CARES Act, because the guidance changes very often. The Treasury issues new guidance and updated FAQs about once a month, but I believe that there was also a change that just happened last week. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background and an update on what we're doing and kind of the next steps we're looking at. So slide, please. Again, the purpose of this presentation is some background to highlight some of our challenges, explain how we're coordinating with Fairfax County, and update you on the usages that we've identified so far and some potential usage. So next slide, please. The town of Herndon is very lucky to be part of Fairfax County. Fairfax County was the only locality in Virginia large enough to get a distribution straight from the Treasury, and the 3 incorporated towns were included in that distribution. So we received about $4.28 million in late April. It is sitting on the balance sheet as a due to federal government, and it's sitting in our savings account. The basic guidance from the U.S. Treasury, again, is that the funds cannot be used to supplement lost revenues. They can only be used for directly incurred and necessary expenditures related to the COVID-19 pandemic and our response to it that were not necessarily accounted for in the budget that was in effect as of March 27th. And these expenses have to be incurred between March 1st and December 30th, 2020, but not just incurred. The money has to be spent by December 30th. This is a federal grant with mandatory recipient, which is Fairfax County, and subrecipient requirements, that's us. So it is subject to single audit. It is subject to the Inspector General's audit. And if we don't get this right, we have to pay the money back. So it would make a bad problem worse. Next slide, please. Again, some of the challenges, the guidance from the U.S. Treasury is not meant to illustrate every single scenario. They have provided some really good updated FAQs, but it is vague on purpose because we are permitted to use judgment. We are first reporting to Fairfax County so they can meet the deadline for the Inspector General's first reporting requirement is July 17th. We also need to make sure that we're coordinating, which we are, between HPD and finance to make sure that we're not double counting and charging expenditures that we're using CARES money for against FEMA and vice versa. And just a shout out to Arlene Garcia for doing a fantastic job of really managing the FEMA aspect of this. Also, just ensuring that our procurement and documentation and retention requirements are met according to these updating guidelines. Next slide, please. The coordination with Fairfax County has been great. We're working with some very seasoned professionals from the finance department and their grants department. We have weekly meetings and with Fairfax County key staff and the finance directors from the 3 towns. We ask first if we're not sure if an expense would be eligible. Some are very obvious, like PPE and cleaning that and the sneeze guards. That's obviously okay. Some I didn't hear.
His microphone is muted.
I think everyone got muted. Okay, so Signe, you are still muted. There you go. We can't see you, but I think we'll be able to hear you. Yes.
Sorry. So I really, given the severity of what's going on, given the cost of hospitalization and the loss of labor, given simple humanitarian reasons, I do think that we should make a huge effort to outreach in these communities. And I say that as someone who has a very, I mean, people in my neighborhood, their children were exposed to children who had COVID-19 because the family didn't speak English. And, you know, that given how much information is out there, it seemed just amazing to me. But these are people who are working all the time. And I really feel like we could be spending that money. $3,000 doesn't seem like a lot to me. Also passing out maybe PPE if we have access to that. Anyway, just my 2 cents. But I mean, I really do think we should make a huge effort to give some outreach in our community. We're small. We know where people are. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't really make a huge effort. So I know you've made a huge effort in other ways. I don't mean to imply that, but I really would like to see this population targeted and helped. So thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. D'Aguila.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember D'Aguila. So Jenny, thanks for that. I don't know, I just a contrarian view here. There's no such thing as free money, right? So what are our exposures? I know you listed them on slide 4. There's some vague guidance, and then there's still some discussion to be had. What have we identified to date of the total bucket? Because I was trying to add up those numbers, but I was getting cut in and out on what you've currently identified. But
there is risk if we spend the funds on something that is ultimately not directly, or that's deemed to not be directly associated with mitigating the effects of the pandemic, or it somehow results in us recovering revenue, then we would owe that money back, and we would owe it out of our general fund balance or our revenue streams. So the exposure is, if we spend the full 4.2 million and we do it incorrectly, the exposure is the 4.2 million. Obviously, we're not
and gray zones when you start talking about federal monies. So I think, you know, my input would be, my guidance would be, let's absolutely take down what we can that we're absolutely sure on. And, you know, that other stuff, I just would stay away from it and just like not even touch it. And I would just feel so much better not even going into that gray zone. That's just my take on this. So, but I trust you guys, and I'm really nervous whenever we get stuff like this. So that's it. Thank you.
Well, and I think what we're trying to, I'm sorry, Jenny, I think what we're trying to do is we have costs that are incurred, whether we have CARES Act to cover it or not. And we're just trying to apply in every case possible. If we can get reimbursed from CARES, we're trying to go there. We're not just looking for ways to spend money.
No,
understood. No, I know that's not what you meant, but it is complicated. And I hear you on federal funding. And I always wonder, when's the other shoe drop?
If it's gray, stay away.
Okay. And that's one of the reasons why it looks like our spending has been low. It's partially we have a few more weeks of experience with this. There's more guidance that's been issued, literally hot off the presses this week and late last week. What else is there? And yes, because the other thing that we always keep in mind is that there will be audits after this, and context won't matter. What will matter is, do you have that packing slip? Did you get that invoice?
Yeah.
And so would that trigger us having to pay things back? Maybe not. But if you start getting dings from one federal program, then it's, as a former auditor, that's a sign that you should look at your other federal programs and how are you doing with those. So yes, there's more to it that you just always have to be careful of, making sure you're following all these rules. And that's again why Fairfax County has been such an amazing resource. They have great depth and strength in these areas and are helping guide us along with this too.
Yeah, and we are so fortunate because there are still our other jurisdictions in Northern Virginia who haven't seen any money yet. So we are grateful for that relationship with the county. Any other questions from anyone? I would guess there are. No? All right. Well, if you think of other things, I'm certainly send them to the town manager, who will get them to Jenny for answers. And if you have any creative ideas, I'm sure she's all ears. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Okay, that brings us, I believe, to Roundtable. Who has comments for us this evening? Anyone? Ms. Friedrichs.
Hi. I was hoping some other members of the town council might be interested in moving to meeting in person now that we're in phase 3. I know we've had some discussion of, the numbers in Herndon not being as low as in other parts of the county, and so an issue. But I do believe that if phase 3 allows social meetings of 250 people or more, our meetings are fairly sedate. I think we should, if others agree, I think we should try and move as soon as humanly possible to a non-electronic meeting. And I want to mention that that joint meeting we had with the Planning Commission earlier this year kind of showed me that it's possible to set out a lot of tables, and we weren't socially distant at that point, but there was a lot of real estate on that table. I also think that if there's concern among staff, maybe they could attend electronically and we could attend in person, because it's so hard to communicate, as we saw tonight. This is clunky. We have only ever had one person from an audience try to speak to us, and I think that's if people aren't comfortable enough to, it may be because it's summertime and COVID and whatever, but if people aren't comfortable enough with the method of speaking forth to us, I think given the situation now, maybe we could, I would like to say, given the situation now, I think we should have meetings. And if the situation declines, we could always go back to electronic meetings. So I don't know how anyone else feels about that.
Comments? Other comments for Roundtable?
Yes. So,
Ms. Baker?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Jennifer Baker. Yeah, related to Signy's comment. I think that's fair. I think that's a good idea. Certainly, I know other jurisdictions have done that. One thought on that might be to continue to have work sessions in this format, since we don't really have a great spot to do work sessions in a socially distant way, even with masks on. So perhaps we keep work sessions virtual, but we do bring back public hearings in person, because I do think, it is harder for the public to sort of feel that same level of participation as when they can physically be in the space with us. So that would be my suggestion on a potential compromise.
Other comments on this topic or other topics? Signy, did you have anything else before we run away with it? Or I'm not sure. Does anyone else want to weigh in on the meeting format. I am very uncomfortable with work sessions for the reasons that Ms. Baker said. We just don't have a good way to set that up socially distanced. It's already pretty, there are some challenges with the room under regular circumstances. And the cleaning aspect for having a, well, any meeting in the chambers, the court is the following morning, and with the enhanced cleaning, I don't know what that involves, but I know that is a situation we would have to resolve. So does anybody else want to comment on this topic? And then we'll continue roundtable. Cesar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Delagula. Yeah, I mean, I get wanting to do that, but personally, you know, my parents are 85, and I do take care of them every day. I would probably just stick virtual for right now until you know, we had some more testing. But I mean, if other folks want to do that, that's fine. But I would probably opt out depending on how the layout of the room was. But you know, I'd certainly be open to seeing what that layout looked like. But my first inclination would be I would probably stay away for now.
So, Madam Town Attorney, if I could jump in, our ordinance that we passed, which allows us to do this, is through September. Is that correct? It was. I mean, it can certainly be amended at any time, but
end of September, we can always, Lisa Yates, Town Attorney, we can always amend it. Currently, though, it expires if council takes no action. It expires on September 26th. We thought that was a long time, probably at the time we enacted it, and now we're thinking it's not long enough. There is room to amend it, though, for an additional period of time.
So, given that we only have one work session and one public hearing in July and August, perhaps this is something we should have on our minds and see what we know in August, whether we would want to come back in September or go through the month of September. Because the other issue is, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head, school is supposedly starting in some format in late August, early September, and I don't think we can predict what surge may or may not happen with that too. I hear you, Signe, 100%. This is not ideal for a lot of reasons, but I still think there's so many unknowns. I don't know that I'm ready to make a solid call tonight on either direction, but I think it is a conversation to be had. Bill, I see your hand.
Yeah, just to kind of, I guess, dovetail some of the points that were made. You know, Mr. Delagula, I tend to agree. The only thing I would have a concern about is some of our full-time employment. We may, because, for example, I have travel restrictions in regards to what I do. I'm not allowed to go anywhere, see, you know, so depending upon even what our employers will allow us to do, that could be an issue because of contact tracing and some other things. There's an abundance of issues that I know for a fact my company is still working out because they're based in Fort Lauderdale. They're not going back to work anytime soon. So, you know, I know it's a little bit different here, but I do think that some of us have to consider that based upon, you know, as I say, it's our jobby job, full-time stuff, but also I am respectful of Mr. Delagula's situation with his parents because we are around older people. We could be, you know, doing something that we don't mean to do. So that's just, I would check our employment and some other things before we kind of jump into that. Just something to consider.
Other comments on this suggestion? Sheila?
I'm just still the health crazy girl that said, keep your mask on. So we're going to have to wear masks. I would want to wear gloves. And it's not too easy to speak when I meet my neighbors outside and I'm talking like this. We can't hardly hear each other. I mean, we tend to go 10 feet apart to talk and take the mask off. So,
you know, I apologize, Sheila.
Times more likely to catch something from someone you're around than when you're outside. And even when we did outside for the weekend of the 4th, several of us brought fans so that there would be extra air moving. And plus it was hot. So, I mean, I still think there's a lot of icky things out there. And if we're inside, I don't see how we're going to take these meeting outside, because sometimes in the summer we have thunderstorms like we did a few nights ago. So,
Yeah. Signy.
Well, I just want to say that I hear all of your objections and understand, and I'll bring it up again later. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I don't know that we're objecting. I think we're just trying to muck through it and see what the best thing to do is. And I anticipate this is another thing that's going to come up on our regional calls, because everybody is in a different state of how they're meeting and what they are comfortable moving forward doing. So I'll be interested in what our colleagues are doing in other jurisdictions. So if I learn anything interesting, I will certainly share it with you guys. Was there anything else, Signy? Okay. Who else has comments for Roundtable? Anyone? Going once? Yes, sir. Mr. De Aguila.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember De Aguila. It's been a week. I was thinking about this. And again, I want to just bring up the process, not the content of the press conference. And I sent a couple emails to the town attorney. And again, I want to focus on process. I don't want to get into the details of the content of what was delivered. What I'm curious about is, what is the process for either leads or department heads, or whatever you want to call them, to actually hold press conferences? So I was a little bit confused in terms of, I would have expected council to have been notified much sooner than we had. So again, just want to stick the conversation to process. If someone can enlighten me on what that process is, like, would DPW need to hold a press conference? How would that process work?
So is that who's going to answer that question? I know that DPW, we have a PIO for the whole town, Ann Curtis, with the exception of the police department, who has their own PIO because they get lots and lots of inquiries. So the chief doesn't work for me. So I don't know, Mr. Town Manager, do you have, maybe you can shed more light on that?
Yes,
I don't want to misspeak.
certainly, Madam Mayor. So basically, the process of a press conference is something that rarely happens. And in fact, I've only seen it in my time here twice. They both were out of the police department. They both pertained to law enforcement issues. They both pertained to personnel. They both had serious allegations attached to them. In this case, when the issues were breaking and the police were fielding media inquiries, they weren't coming into my office. They weren't coming into Ann's office. So when that came up, the chief was the chief law enforcement officer of the town, receiving those inquiries into her office, thought it was probably best to share the information we had immediately. The allegation was serious, and time before when it happened, when we had a serious issue with a former employee that to not only discipline, but actually the employee ended up being arrested. So this is only happened, I think, in the Tuesday situation. It was a very compressed time period. That additional information that
Bill, no, I appreciate that. So let me get back to, if someone can enlighten me or storyboard, flowchart what the process is, because I'm hearing it was probably best to share. I get that. I'll give you that. But I think I want to understand the process, because hypothetically, well, no, let me assume there's going to be another need for a press conference. So what is that process? And then what actually should be versus what could be communicated, and how does that get resolved? Because again, I go back to, yes.
Madam Town Attorney.
I can answer with regard to law enforcement. That is, with regard to law enforcement issues, the chief of police, as the chief law enforcement officer, pursuant to state and town law has the obligation and the access to the information to respond. And so with regard to law enforcement issues, which the two that the town manager mentioned were law enforcement issues. With regard to that, the decision is going to be made by the chief and communicated to the council either by the manager, the mayor, or myself. Period.
And can you share that documented, or is that something that is just kind of a best practice? Where does it state that council, and I get you want to keep these entities apart in most cases, but what if a majority of council believes a specific message should be communicated? Do we give autonomy to the head of that department to communicate whatever message they're comfortable sharing? Is there not a reporting structure through the town manager or the town attorney, through the town council? Who's running the town in essence, as far as messaging?
With regard to departments other than the police department, the town manager is. The town manager has
what
some
you're
authority
saying
over the police department, but with regard to law enforcement matters, that's dictated by state law.
No. I'm talking about, again, the process of the press conference. Who determines what message gets shared, if it's a sentiment, or if it's opinion, or if it's a position?
Well, the chief has the authority to do that, and she was not sharing opinion; she was sharing additional information that the police department had.
Again, this is where I'll take that as, let me give you the counterpoint. There are people that said that and again, I want to stay away from content because I want to focus on the process. If the video wasn't shared and the video wasn't seen, how can someone communicate what they communicated in an absolute term? And I just think we, the council, should have been either notified or somehow involved in the process, because you may have a majority of council that don't agree with what was said. And again, if the purpose is to keep those two entities apart and that's state mandated, I'm okay with that. But I still don't understand where you have one entity having the authority to communicate what they want, and then we have a council over here that's supposed to be kind of in charge of the entire Herndon body.
Well, this was a police issue, not a political issue. All of the inquiries were going to the police department. They weren't coming to the council or to the manager's office.
So what I'm hearing is there is no council involvement in the process of what gets communicated out of the police department. Is that what we're saying?
Regarding law enforcement
this was not, again, this was a press conference of a matter that you have a nonprofit and a parent and another parent. And I just think the council should be involved in that process. And again, I'm not hearing where it's an absolute. I'm hearing it's kind of like in there in a general authority somewhere.
I stand by, this was not a political issue. This was a police issue, and it was handled as other police issues have been handled.
I'm just curious if if that makes sense. The council has no say in what's communicated out. I mean,
on police issues, no, I don't believe that we do.
And I would add, Madam Mayor, just one moment, please, that on law enforcement issues, there is no way that the council could that anyone other than law enforcement could have access to or knowledge of all the different factors involved in a particular issue.
So here's the
understand that there
process.
might be
Right?
different,
Can you please let her finish?
that there might be different opinions regarding something. I think that as far as the process goes, council would not, I know of no other board or council in the state where that would be required of law enforcement. But in this particular circumstance, as we said, that is the press conference followed the course that the other had followed regarding making sure that all the information was out there. It was a short period of time, and that's nothing unusual was done.
Okay, so just again, a contrary view. Had the council been told that not all the evidence was viewed or wasn't available, my recommendation would have been to change the wording a little bit. And again, if we're part of that sort of consultative process, I think you would have had a different outcome, because what you're going to have now is more accusations. You're going to have more press conferences. And I just think it'd be beneficial to everyone if the council is involved in these things. Just not to approve anything. I'm not suggesting we write statements, but doesn't it make sense to be consulted in a matter like this, especially matters like the one I'm referring to, especially today, especially when you have such a sort of hotbed of potential responses? I think it would have been better to have council involved in the process. And I don't think it takes away anything. In fact, it would have added to what was being said or communicated at that point. And I'm done talking about it. I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. Who else has comments for Roundtable? Mr. DeCall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to ask one question, since Councilmember Vilagula brought this issue, but I'm also not going to the content or anything. But my question is, a lot of people are asking one question in social media, and I've been hearing that question. I have asked that question to our town attorney and got the answer as well. But for people, so that people can hear, people are talking about the video that Fairfax County Public School has, and what is the process to obtain the video, or if anybody, either the town council or anybody or police or anybody has any chance of getting, from legal perspective, from compliance perspective, I do understand getting any workaround of getting that video, because a lot of people are asking that question. So I just wanted to put that question in.
I think that question has been asked and answered, but I will defer to the town attorney for that.
The best entity to answer that question is the author and the owner of that document, which is the county. And I have provided that answer, as well as the attorney for the school board provided that answer. So if the public has that question regarding Fairfax County school records, I would urge them to ask Fairfax County Public Schools.
I see Signy's hand. I'm going to make sure, Pradeep, did you have a follow-up?
No, thank you. I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Signy, I think I missed you a second ago, so go ahead.
Okay. My add-on to what Mr. De Aguila said is that I understand the concerns and what the chief needed to share in that particular situation. But I will say that the general public seems to believe, for better or worse, that all the information that comes out of the town is something that we have, in essence, said we know. So when somebody calls me and says, why did you guys do this? Or why did you choose to do that? That's because they believe that as the council, we advise and give our consent to the actions of our staff. Obviously, our staff reports to Bill, and Bill reports to us. But the point is, if we know in advance, if we understand in advance what's coming, and we have the opportunity, at least most of us, obviously you're never going to reach every single member of town council when you're trying to get us at an unusual time, then we'll be able to answer in an appropriate way. But if we don't know about it, if it just shows up 5 minutes before a press conference or whatever, then we're out there kind of going, oh, that's not me. That's other people, which sounds pretty shiftless. So, you know, it's not that I think anything that, I know that the chief needed to share what she needed to share, but my concern is the population that elected us and thinks that we are, at least in some way, responsible for what's going on in the town. So I'd like to be able to answer them. And so in some ways, I really would like to have a little more communication. That's all I'm saying. Thanks.
I think that that there was a very short turnaround between the time that the town had no idea that that press conference was coming. We had heard nothing from anyone regarding this case since, I believe, October. I didn't even know about the case until a couple of weeks before when it was brought to my attention. So it was very reactionary to what was said in the press conference. So 3 hours might sound like a long time, but it really wasn't. And we could have probably communicated a little quicker, but it was certainly not an intentional act. So, I mean, I don't think that's what you're implying. It was a very crazy day. We don't have many of those in the town of Herndon, thankfully. Is there anybody who hasn't spoken yet that would like to speak? Or I see Cesar's hand. Yes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Delagula. And I would say to that, I don't think waiting a day would have hurt, but it would have given us an opportunity to collaborate if that's of value. I don't think anything would have been lost. I think something would have been gained because we all bring different perspectives, worldviews to this. And I'll just share with you, as a minority, and I have a lot of minority friends, you got to understand that statistically, we're more inclined to have experience an injustice, either personally or through a family member or through a neighbor. So when you have someone who either doesn't acknowledge it or is very passionate one way, it sort of further deepens that hurt. And I think had we waited a day, we would have been able to advise and give some potential language or wording or feedback. Look, you can have your views, but there's nothing wrong with hearing the contrarian view. And I will remind everyone that this town is a majority minority immigrant community. So we need to keep remembering that. And you look at the leadership, you look at the council, you look at boards, chairs, and commissions, that diversity isn't represented there. So there's this tension out there, guys. If you don't know about it, I'm here to tell you, it's there. I hear about it all the time. So I think waiting a day would have helped us. And again, I go back to the process. I think we still need to address the process. And thank you for letting me speak.
Sheila, you have been extremely patient waiting for your turn to speak.
Just because we're having a big discussion about this, I will say that I first learned about this on June 18th, my anniversary of all days, and then I got to end the day with this. But I took it immediately to our town manager. And then on June 25th, I was able to have a meeting, which everyone was offered, to meet with our chief and town manager. And in that meeting, I was amazed at what the chief told me about what had happened back in September and then October. And then June 30th, kind of like a firebomb, there was all of a sudden a press release. And I was on the phone with someone with the school board just before it hit. And they had tried to have conversations. But I really, when I heard things being said, I can't say that I would have been wanting to tell the chief how to do that. I think the chief knows her staff and she had done research. And then as I've been able to be my Monday morning quarterback, going over and looking at all of the press conferences, all of the one video I got to see, of course, not the school video, because I had no child on the bus, so I'm not going to even ask to see that. But when I go back and look at all that, I mean, considering the allegations made towards our officer, those could be criminal. So I can see why the things ended up like they did. And I have not gotten negative feedback from people I know in the town. And I've talked to people of a lot of different ethnicities about this. This was a big talk 4th of July weekend too. So that's where I am. But I did know about it from June 18th and really got briefed on exactly what happened on the 25th. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Are there other comments for Roundtable this evening?
All right, I think I'm. The mayor, can you hear me?
The mayor froze, so go ahead.
Oh, I thought it was me that
I
froze.
think her thing froze. Yes.
Having a signal issue too. All right, thanks, Sheila. Yeah, I'm going to chime in on this as well then, just to simply say, I think we all recognize the sensitivity of this topic, anything related to police, given the sensitivity of what's happening, has been happening, and certainly of the last 6 weeks or so. But I certainly want to just voice my strong commitment and to our chief and to how she handled it, and the fact that we have a full-time PIO in Lisa Herndon to represent the police. I certainly think we can always coach that or think about how it could have been done differently, but I certainly think timing is really important, and trying to get 7 other members of council so that they're in the loop or informed or any of those things, I think is unnecessary to really the mission of the police is to communicate with the public. We're elected officials. That is, I don't think that's not our role. And us being informed when we were informed, I think was acceptable in this case.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on any? Sorry, guys.
Oh, she's back.
Am I back?
I think you were. You said, "Is there anyone else?" And then you froze.
Froze. Sorry, guys.
Again. If you can hear us, the Vice Mayor can fill in if you want to ask one more time, Madam Vice Mayor.
Does anyone else want to speak? The mayor has frozen again.
Can you guys hear me? I turned my video off, hoping that might help.
Thank you. Go ahead.
We hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I think that this was a very difficult situation with a lot of different moving parts, and I stand behind the chief and how she handled the situation. So is there no further comments on anything for Roundtable? Going once? I'm not going to turn my camera back on because I'm afraid I'll freeze. Mr. Town Manager, do you have any further comments for us this evening?
I have nothing, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So that concludes our agenda this evening. Is there a motion to adjourn?
This is Sheila Olam, Madam Mayor. I move we adjourn. Seeing no other.
This is Pradeep Dakal, I second.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn made by the Vice Mayor and seconded by Mr. DeCall. I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Yes, Vice Mayor Olem,
Yes.
Councilmember Baker,
Baker, yes.
Councilmember Delagula,
Councilmember Delagula, yes.
Councilmember DeCall,
Councilmember Dakal, yes.
Councilmember Friedrichs,
Signe Friedrichs, yes.
Councilmember McKenna,
You're muted.
You're muted, Bill.
Yep.
Okay.
okay, and Mayor Merkel.
Mayor Merkel, yes. So that motion carries, and we stand adjourned at 9:44 p.m. Thank you, everybody.